Psychological philosophical analysis dive into the Stranger Things series. Hawkins, the threatened home, trauma, and cracks in daily life. A suspenseful hook to grab your attention in the first few seconds. Do you really know the place where you live? Or does each routine hide an inverted world of secrets, fears, and traumas that no one dares to name? Hawkins, Indiana, could be any town. Far beyond the cliches of small American life, it embodies not only the comfortable home, but also the minefield of the unspoken, the repressed, the collective trauma, the appearance of normalcy, with its school parties, tree-lined streets, and family dinners, is only the surface layer of restless soil. Everything there pulsates when something is about to disappear. In the Jungian universe, Hawkins is the home that does not protect, a symbol of the archetypes of threatened childhood. The city, as a setting, is also a character. The low walls, the sinister laboratory on the outskirts, the suburban houses. Every detail speaks to our subconscious about the terror of growing up in a world that doesn't allow us to ignore its own monsters. Will Byers, the kidnapped ego, the call to the journey. Will's disappearance is much more than the loss of a child. It's the dissolution of the center, the temporary collapse of the hope and innocence that Hawkins believed it had kept intact. Will represents the hijacked ego, a part of ourselves that, when disconnected, opens the door for all sorts of shadows to invade consciousness. In depth psychology, he is the unwitting hero, the one who, because he is more vulnerable, is chosen to go through hell and come back changed, if he manages to come back at all. The search for Will mobilizes not only friends and family, but the entire collective psyche of the city. Joyce, her mother, embodies the archetype of the warrior mother. No matter what anyone says, she trusts her intuition, defies all limits, and refuses to accept that the disappearance has a simplistic external cause. Hopper, the police officer, brings the drama of wounded fatherhood. He lost his own daughter, and sees in Will a chance for redemption, but also the pain of his own grief. The chaos of the disappearance reveals that every individual trauma is at its core a call for the community to confront its own fears. Have you ever seen your family or city crumble in the face of trauma? Hawkins teaches us that behind every routine, there is always a wound waiting to be discovered, and only those who have the courage to look at it can save what truly matters. Laboratory location, the secret, the power, and the great unnameable. Hawkins National Laboratory is not just an antagonist, it is the institutional face of repression. There, power experiments on what it cannot control, the mind-fear difference. Joyce and the children fight against the external monster, but also against the institutional monster, the laws that don't explain, the adults who don't listen, the science that only wants to dominate and not ask questions. On a philosophical level, Hawkins is the city of eternal return. Everything that is swept into the unconscious sooner or later comes back, and it comes back armed, dangerous, demanding explanation, reconciliation, confrontation. The split. Everyday life. Games, lies, and childish fear. The children's routine, role-playing games, birthday parties, school, slowly gives way. Each episode reveals that every childhood holds the premonition of terror, bullying, abandonment, loneliness. Mike, Dustin, Lucas, 11. They all know in their own way that growing up requires facing not only the Demogorgon, but also the rules that the adult world uses to keep everything under control. The clique of popular kids, the absent or authoritarian parents, the petty cruelties at school. Everything is a microcosm of the city's grand drama. Connection to the Cold War, social paranoia, and the fear of difficulty. The historical context of the series is not accidental. The paranoia of the Cold War mirrors the contemporary fear of losing security, stability, and order. The laboratory, the secrets, the Russian threat, everything is a representation of the fear of the other, of the unknown, of the different. A fear that, as Jung teaches, is not only external, but always reappears from within. In Stranger Things, there is no gratuitous terror. Every monster, every disappearance, every flickering light is a warning from the psyche. Even the most ordinary town can crumble if you don't listen to what it needs to say. Hawkins is not a backdrop. It is the collective psyche about to be ruptured, infected, traversed. Will is called to the upside down just as we are called to grief, to crisis, to transition. The entire city will have to decide, pretend everything is normal, or confront the abyss, the upside-down world, the ID, the shadow, and the inner beasts. If everything you repress, fear, or forget were to take physical form, what would you see before you? Stranger Things shows that the upside down isn't just horror. It's the perfect portrait of the most dangerous psychological universe, the one that lives inside each of us. Hawkins's surface is deceiving. Beneath the routine of clean houses and familiar noises lies an undercurrent of perceptions, traumas, drives, and memories that, repressed, begin to seep through the cracks of everyday life. In the collective unconscious, everything that a society denies, fear of the stranger, of violence, of extreme feelings, of lack of control, accumulates energy until it becomes impossible to silence. The upside down is not just a ghostly setting. It's aesthetic, dark, waterlogged, made of matter and tentacles, fungi, roots, evokes the deep unconscious, a place where what no one wants to see reigns. Here, Jung and Freud cross paths. The shadow, according to Jung, contains everything we deny in ourselves. The id, according to Freud, is the primitive source of drives, desires, and fears, erupting when the superego, social ego, can no longer contain them. In the upside down, boundaries dissolve. The ideal city becomes an oppressive jungle. The rules disappear, everything is possible and everything is a threat. Will Byers, the lost hero, plunges into this abyss and begins to disintegrate. How long can one survive in an environment made of everything that would provoke terror? The Demogorgon. Why are monsters a reflection of ourselves? Demogorgon, the central monster of the early seasons, is a physical manifestation of repressed fear and desire. He doesn't speak, he doesn't negotiate. He acts according to the impulse to consume, destroy, hunt, the id incarnate. The absence of a face, the mouth as the only real organ highlighted, is a symbol of the desire to devour and be devoured. Primitive orality, compulsion, nameless terror. The Demogorgon appears first to children, precisely because their unconscious is more available, less domesticated, and because children are those who have not yet learned to be silent, to pretend, or to repress. Adults, in trying to rationalize the terror, only end up feeding the beast even more. In classical mythology, the monster is always the guardian of the threshold. To cross it, one must experience fear, failure, and radical otherness. The Demogorgon forces everyone to confront what terrifies them, that which they were not ready to see. The architecture of trauma, the atmosphere in the upside down is suffocating, but more importantly, it's familiar. It runs parallel to our world, only with all the colors stripped away, all the sounds distorted, all the rules annulled. These traces are the mark of trauma in memory. That which was too violent to be integrated returns in a deformed, fragmented, frightening form. Will, a prisoner in this universe, begins to lose himself as if he were falling apart. His identity, his voice, his sense of belonging. In other words, the inverted world is depression, the traumatic state, dissociation, and each episode shows that the psyche is at risk when isolated in an environment made only of shadows. The Demogorgon is not just a physical predator, it is a predator of hope, and everyone around feels that its presence threatens not only bodies, but the emotional, cognitive, and affective well-being of the group. How do you defeat a monster that was created by all the times we failed to confront our own pain? What if the real Demogorgon can't be killed, but only integrated? The mind flayer, collective fear, psychic contamination. As the seasons progress, Stranger Things terribly expands on the consequences of collective resentment. Enter the mind flayer, a beast that, unlike the individualistic Demogorgon, seeks collective assimilation, network contamination. He infiltrates minds, dominates hearts, and builds his army in the underground of customs, affections, and social pacts. This monster is collective trauma. As Hawkins resists the truth, she becomes increasingly vulnerable to the massive onslaught of the shadow. It is the fear of acceptance, the panic of change, the horror in the face of otherness. Ceremonies, rumors, gossip, persecutions. The fear of the monster grows like an epidemic. Every repressed mind becomes raw material for the expansion of the devourer. The terror here is philosophical. We are all vulnerable to what a community represses. Resentment, prejudice, and collective hatred are real, viral monsters capable of destroying bonds. What trauma, secret, or fear within your group has grown out of control, becoming a collective monster and threatening all bonds? 11. The child who opens portals. Symbol of power and repressed pain. Brief analysis for transition. At the heart of the abyss, 11 operates as a threshold. Her power is both a source of hope and a risk of destruction. She is the divine child of myths, but also a victim of the worst institutional abuses, a self fragmented between a desire to belong and terror of her own power. By opening portals, 11 manifests the power of trauma. Her fear fuels the monster. Her pain is used as material for experiments. Her vulnerability becomes a battleground between worlds. When a single person carries the weight of all collective trauma, who will save them from the monster? And what price must be paid to close or cross the portal? The upside-down world, the ID, the shadow, and the inner beasts. In philosophical and mythological tradition, every dark universe is dual. An external world, stability, routine, appearances, and an internal one, instability, repression, conflict. Stranger Things, in creating the Upside Down, reenacts the myth of the descent into the underworld. Orpheus searching for Eurydice, Persephone imprisoned by Hades, Alice through the looking glass. According to Jung, the collective unconscious is made up of layers. Repressions, traumas that are only partially integrated, fears inherited from culture, city history, and families. When Hawkins tries to ignore his scars, he ends up opening fissures, the collective psyche leaking through the lab, through Will's disappearance, through the lights that set walls and hearts ablaze. The Upside Down is organically alive, almost like a giant brain. Vines, roots, fungi, and corridors resemble neural networks and intertwined memories. The terror of Hawkins is that no one is innocent. Every inhabitant has something hidden in the basement of their soul, ready to be absorbed by the Demogorgon or the Mind Flayer. The ID of the characters, unveiling pounds of shadow. Will Byers. Will's ID is driven by instinct and sensitivity. His journey through the Upside Down is a struggle to survive without being consumed by helplessness. The trauma of the spiritual abduction marks everyone who loves him. The boy becomes a symbol of the innocent who paid for collective traumas. Joyce. The maternal id is sacrificial, passionate, desperate. Her sensitivity to flickering light is, in fact, an opening of the mind to the unconscious. She sees what no one dares to see, feels what no one wants to feel. Joyce confronts the external monster because she has already tamed 1,000 internal monsters. Hopper. Hopper's ID is repressed grief, lost love, an attempt to compensate for excessive police rationality. He carries the potential for heroism, but is always on the verge of psychic collapse. In Hawkins, all authority risks being consumed by its own shadow. Mike, Dustin, Lucas, Max. Each child reveals nuances of the id on different fronts: courage, intelligence, competition, fear of abandonment, desire for belonging. In the group, the collective unconscious screams, only together can they cross the jungle of fears. Separated, they are all easy prey. The monster as an archetype of inner horror. Demogorgons and mind flayers are metaphysical monsters, incapable of dialogue, voracious, panphagic, without morals or law. They represent primitive drives, death instincts, violence not subjected to civilizing discourse. For Jung, the monster cannot be destroyed but must be confronted, integrated, giving the ego renewed strength. Monsters attack those who are vulnerable. those who are already hurt, those who have never been heard. Therefore will 11 and Billy suffer. They are bearers of collective and individual trauma. The portals, scars between realities. Every opening between Hawkins and the Upside Down is the scar. Laboratory, arrogant, repressive science that tries to dominate the mind and body, but ends up creating monsters. The buyer's house, a home shattered by the consequences of what was never said. Grief, abandonment, fear of failure. School farm, a space of bullying, exclusion, and micro-traumas that are multiplied and ignored by adults. What secret have you never revealed to your family, at school, or even to yourself? What if it could open real cracks in your world? What you repress comes back hungry. Share how Stranger Things made you rethink your most hidden fears. The Upside Down world is collective therapy. By illuminating the gap between everyday life and trauma, Stranger Things transforms horror into healing. Children learn that there is no way out only if everyone goes through it together. If the hand that reaches out to others doesn't let go in the darkest moments, it's not enough to survive the monster. It's necessary to rebuild bonds, truths, and narratives. What happens when the monster turns into a mirror? 11 is ready to open or close the portal. But will it be possible to survive what is about to emerge from the abyss? 11. Experiment, trauma, and the wild power of the psyche. The story of 11 is a brutal invitation to peek into the most secret laboratory of the human soul. From birth, she was not treated as a person, but as a project. The daughter of a mother sacrificed for the experiment, an object of manipulation by a state that never asked how she felt. The real name, Jane, almost never appears. 11 is a number, an icon, a gap between identity and namelessness. In the lab, 11 is the environment of industrialized trauma. Cold walls, exams, injections, telepathic commands. Dr. Brenner, the terrifying daddy, embodies the institutional violence of those who want to exploit the mind without knowing anything about real affection. 11's opening scenes are shrouded in silence. She doesn't speak because she was silenced. Its power lies dormant because it has been repressed, tested, and violated. In Freudian terminology, your ID is pure undirected energy, bestial potential stifled by method, always on the verge of transforming into destruction or miracle. Can you imagine being the only person capable of saving everyone, but without even having the right to define who you are? 11 represents the ultimate desire, to be loved, to be free, to be someone. The laboratory, trauma, experiments, and the origin of the rift. The research environment, contrary to what it promises, creates more monsters than solutions. Dr. Brenner, driven by a thirst for power, trains 11 without any respect. She has to move objects, kill cats, and spy on minds. Each achievement is just another layer of wound, another step in the climb of pain. Have you ever felt that all the expectations placed on you were, deep down, just another experiment, just another test to see how much you can take? With each test, 11 splits herself in two. Part of you wants to please, part of you wants to escape. Your mind is a living laboratory of dissociation. She learns to protect herself by fleeing into her own inner world, creating imaginary fortresses that later become her greatest asset against real horror. What if the key to defeating demogorgons lay not in strength, but in trauma? 11 doesn't yet realize it. Her own wounds are what will open and close all the gates of hell. Silence and the gaze, the language of the traumatized child. 11 hardly speaks, especially in the early seasons. Their communication takes the form of gestures, silence, wide eyes, expressions of guilt, fear, and pleas for affection. The absence of speech is the space where your id, the drive, desire, and pain, screams the loudest. She understands that in order to survive, she needs to observe and absorb everything before acting. Silence is the language of the wounded. Have you ever remained silent because the world was unable to hear your true cry? When 11 escapes from the lab, She also escapes the institutional silence. The search for a voice is also a search for identity, a journey to conquer not only freedom, but the language to say yes and no, to be someone in the eyes of others. The encounter with the group, from trauma to bonding. When 11 meets Mike, Dustin, Lucas, and Will, it's as if her repressed potential gets a chance to exist within a community. Mike in particular sees beyond the surface. His admiration for 11 isn't just for her power, but because he recognizes in her the pain of someone who has never been seen. Within the group, communication changes. 11 learns the value of the pact, of shared secrets, of loyalty. Each child sees in her both hope and danger. Adults, on the other hand, continue to project only power onto her, not affection. Who was the first person who truly saw you? And what happens when that gaze is capable of transforming trauma into a superpower? The group is your second chance, but also your biggest risk. With each threat, 11 must decide to use force and isolate oneself further, trust and risk losing everything again. The constant dilemma keeps the character in suspense and the viewer as well. Everything that was repressed, pain, silence, and escape will take shape. When 11 finally opens the portal, it's not just Hawkins who is at risk. It's the entire structure of her affections, her convictions, and the very monsters that inhabit her mind, and the minds of those watching. 11. Experiment, trauma, and the wild power of the psyche. Power as a wound, telekinesis and trauma. 11's power doesn't stem from brute force. It's trauma transformed into energy, dissociation turned into a tool. Telekinetic and telepathic, she accesses invisible dimensions, breaks the barriers of time and space, but always pays the price of physical exhaustion, hemorrhage, and emotional pain. Each time he uses his powers, he bleeds from the nose. The body demands its due. There is no gift without wounds, no salvation without passing through suffering. Have you ever felt that the stronger you needed to be, the more painful it became to maintain that strength? 11 carries a body marked by the struggle against her own limits. In the laboratory, training always took place in environments of emotional scarcity, food deprivation, sleep deprivation, and deprivation from other activities. 11's brain expanded out of fear, out of the need to survive, not out of the pleasure of being recognized. Dr. Brenner, without realizing it, built a weapon by denying humanity. Every time 11 resists or is injured, her id absorbs energy. Her power is refined, but it also grows in the shadow of abandonment. The fragmented id. Who is 11? Who is Jane? Beneath the numbers, there is Jane. Jane is the child who dreamed of a mother, of affection, of routine, of simple words. 11 is the mask, what she wears to survive, the armor shaped by institutional trauma. Often the character oscillates between extremes. In her escape, she only wants to be Jane, an invisible girl protected from the world. In combat, you need to be 11, a wild spirit capable of defeating monsters. This duality is not just about survival. It is the desire to integrate, to transform fragments into a person, to abandon the shards of the laboratory, to allow the ID to connect to the full ego. Are you just the role that pain has made you play, or is there a real child trying to escape this labyrinth? The emotional labyrinth, friendships, loves, and the fear of losing everything. While 11 discovers the power of her bond with Mike, a friendship that turns into teenage love, she also fears a repeat of her losses. Every time someone connects, they are at risk. Every approach can be sabotaged by the monster, by one's own insecurity, by the inverted world of the mind. The relationship with Mike is both protection and a threat. The love that saves is the same love that can hurt, and 11 senses with anguish that there is something in her capable of bringing disaster to those she loves. She withdraws, isolates herself, tries to find safe ground. But in Hawkins, safety is an illusion. The series teaches that all temporary happiness is a minefield for the reactivation of trauma. What was your biggest fear when falling in love or making a friend? Did you ever think that love was too dangerous? When 11 is called upon to confront demogorgons, the mind flayer, and other horrors, the battle is not merely physical, it is existential. Each confrontation is a replay of all the times the lab tried to use her against herself. Each victory, a millimeter of regaining dignity. The portal, for 11, is twofold. What opens up to save Hawkins from chaos? What she needs to keep locked away inside her own chest to avoid being overwhelmed by fear and pain. The sequence of great battles shows that there is no definitive solution. There will always be a new monster, a renewed trauma, a crisis that forces us to redefine power, love, and abandonment. When the war ends, peace is only apparent. What will be the next abyss that 11 or you will have to close to stay alive? Confront or flee? Whenever Hawkins tries to ignore the signs left by the monsters, the pain returns. Nightmares, visions, distrust, paranoia. 11 is the sentinel of trauma. Her mind is tuned to the radios of danger. Only she listens. Only she anticipates. Only she pays so that no one else has to suffer so much. The reconstruction of the laboratory, 11's exile, the loss of powers. Everything serves to show that trauma never disappears. It can only be digested, given new meaning. In the end, her greatest power is not destroying monsters, but surviving herself, integrating Jane with 11, the pain with the bond, the weapon with the child. Your inner monster can destroy everything, or it can become a source of overcoming. 11 challenges everyone, and you. What power have you discovered by surviving your own trauma? The circle and the fragmented hero. Have you ever been part of a group that seemed to understand you better than your own family? In Stranger Things, no one survives alone. But what happens when each friend carries their own shadow, and the sum of their traumas can be more dangerous than any demogorgon? What's striking about Stranger Things is that the true hero is never unified. He is fragmented, multifaceted, contradictory. The circle of Will, Mike, Dustin, Lucas, and later Max is an archetype of the therapeutic group, each bringing their own abyss, seeking in the other the reflection of something they need healing. Dungeons and Dragons, much more than just play. Role-playing games are not just a nerdy pastime. It's a metaphor. Each adventure on the board is a foreshadowing of the horrors of the Upside Down. Here the idiot escapes the control of the social superego. The boys can be monsters, magicians, heroes, and without knowing it, they are already rehearsing to journey through their own traumas. What role have you always wanted to play, but never allowed yourself to try? What if your friends were your only chance to avoid getting lost in life's labyrinth? Mike Wheeler, the sensitive leader and the burden of command. Mike is the link between worlds, always tempted to seek answers when everyone else prefers to deny them. His shadow is responsibility. He feels guilty if the group falls apart. He grieves for his sister Nancy, also alone in her battles, and he transfers to 11 the desire to save and be saved. Mike's ID oscillates between courage and fragility. He never accepts adult impositions without questioning them, but at the same time he is terrified of losing what he has already achieved. How many times have you carried the burden for others without saying how much it hurt inside? When Mike falls in love with 11, he reevaluates everything. His leadership ability never stemmed from force, but from offering comfort and emotional support. When she disappears, the group falters, and Mike is consumed by guilt, learning through pain that not everyone can be saved and that he too needs to be seen. The effective brain and the pain of excessive intelligence. Dustin is the genius, the inventor, the one who always seems optimistic, but its shadow is the fear of rejection. However surprising it may be, it fears being left out, of not being enough. Overcoming physical limitations, teeth bullying, is analogous to the effort to integrate the intellectual ID and the basic desire for belonging. For Dustin, creating is both defense and escape. The trauma of being looked down upon, at school, at home, or even within a group, is compensated for with crazy initiatives, innovative gadgets, and the pursuit of solutions that often put everyone at risk. Have you ever tried being the smartest person in the room just to make sure you wouldn't be forgotten? Dustin is the one who teaches. Even knowledge can turn against you if there is no acceptance. Without affection, all intelligence becomes isolation. Lucas Sinclair, the skeptical warrior and the fight against invisible racism. Lucas never readily accepts magical explanations. His shadow is disbelief, armed skepticism, a reflection of someone who daily has had to prove his worth in a world that denies him space, even though the series deals with racism and prejudice in subtle layers. Lucas's ID is fire, courage, but also pent-up anger, a desire to be accepted not despite being different, but because he is different. Your journey is also about trust. How many times will you have to go all the way for friends who may not reciprocate? The affair with Max is an experiment with the desire and fear of being vulnerable. When you finally join a group, do you feel like you have to prove yourself twice as much? Or have you already found space to just be yourself? Lucas demonstrates that every group only matures when it embraces differences without trying to standardize them. Max Mayfield, the stranger, the angry shadow, and the fear of love. Max arrives from afar, Californian, skateboarder, daughter of a dysfunctional family, sister of an abuser. Her ID is in crisis. She wants to be accepted, but not at the cost of betraying her own rebellious nature. It carries the burden of family trauma, loneliness, shame, and desire, all at the same time. The romance with Lucas is a minefield. To love, Max needs to shed his armor, deal with jealousy, the fear of losing what little he has achieved, and confront the shadow of his brother Billy. No one chooses their family, but every true friendship forces you to reinvent who you are. Max challenges everyone and shows that sometimes courage is just asking to stay. In the Upside Down, Max faces her greatest fear, being swallowed before she's even seen. For her, friendship is a safeguard, but also a risk of repeated abandonment. The circle is strong, but each link is forged by terror itself. When the monster comes, the group resists. But if one falters, the whole world could collapse. The circle and the fragmented hero. When they face the Upside Down and the monsters of Hawkins, the circle of friends operates as a collective mind, made up of fragments of each person's ID. There are discussions, fights, temporary alliances, secrets, and pacts, and every decision within the group resonates as a synthesis of individual needs and shared fear. What else unites them? The feeling that only together can they exist. Only together can they be heard. Only together can they dare to challenge the impossible. Have you ever felt that only when speaking in a group did your voice gain the strength to break through the walls of fear? In RPGs, everyone has something to lose. Identity is at stake. The role each person assumes is a metaphor for repressed desires. To be a leader, to be loved, to be strong, to be visible. Jung and the archetypes in Stranger Things Beyond the Plot. Stranger Things delves deep into the journey of individuation. Jung. Each character needs to find their authentic self, integrating shadow, persona, anima, and animus. The group is a testing ground, a safe place to lose, to make mistakes, to discover vulnerability without risking total destruction. Battles with monsters aren't just epic. These are confrontations with one's own fear of failure, of loneliness, of not being enough. In every battle, there is something greater happening beneath the surface. The true monster is what the circle sees in its own reflection. Nancy Wheeler and Jonathan Byers, sub-characters: teenage trauma, courage. Nancy is a mirror of quiet courage. Her journey is about breaking with family expectations, challenging the ideal image of a daughter, sister, girlfriend. She struggles to be heard, to find value beyond superficial layers, and to use her wounds, grief for Barb, conflict with Steve and Jonathan, as a force for growth. Jonathan, in turn, embodies the artist of trauma, photographer, observer, protective brother. Their shadow is the fear of never being enough, of not being able to provide for their family, of being invisible. The romance with Nancy is a refuge, but also a challenge. They both need to learn to trust, to be vulnerable. Have you ever searched for someone who understood your pain, without needing to pretend to be strong or happy? Erica Sinclair, irony, logic, and the power of not being intimidated. Erica, Lucas's sister, represents the ID that is unleashed, the precocious self-affirmation. Their intelligence, sarcasm, and audacity show that the group is never fully prepared for all types of challenges. Updating themselves is essential, and making room for unexpected voices can save not only Hawkins, but the circle itself. Who is the person in your group who always forces everyone to think outside the box? The price of being different. Even within the group, not everything is harmonious. There are arguments, estrangements, moments of stark loneliness. Sometimes the hero who seems strong is the one who needs help the most. Sometimes silence means abandonment. Within the group's universe, they experience micro-traumas: bullying at school, rejection by adults, the fear of losing friends, the panic of being forgotten or replaced, the struggle for attention, love, and belonging, amplifying both the shadow and the maturation process. Does every circle survive the upside down, or is it only those who learn to lose and start over who reach the end of the journey? Just like in life, monsters aren't only external. Rivalries over 11, jealousy for attention, internal disputes are as lethal as the Demogorgon. No group is immune. The more they challenge external threats, the more they need to confront internal contradictions and learn to integrate all sides of friendship. As Hawkins becomes a battleground, each character must revisit old traumas, forgive past mistakes, and find in the other the chance to rebuild their own self. In the world of Stranger Things, no one escapes the monsters just by running away. The real challenge lies in learning to trust each other and knowing that the journey through the subconscious can only be reversed if everyone allows themselves to change together. What happens when the adults who should be protecting are also victims or creators of their own monsters? Stranger Things shows that the greatest battle is between parents and their own shadows. Joyce, Hopper, Brenner. 3 forms of power, 3 ways to fail and transform. Joyce Byers, the wild mother archetype, love risk, grief, intuition. Joyce is pure impulse, a visceral mother, rejected, seen as hysterical until the moment her madness makes sense. Her ID is radical affect and intuition. She feels the lights flickering because she insists on the invisible. She shouts when everyone prefers to ignore. She challenges doctors, police officers, neighbors, the system itself. Joyce's trauma is an old one. Abandoned by her husband, judged for her parenting style, burdened by economic and emotional limitations. When Will disappears, every inch of his body becomes a radar. She is Cassandra, the one who sees the horrors coming but is always on the border between prophecy and despair. How many times have you needed to be called crazy to prove your own love? Joyce teaches that a mother's courage can save far more than just her children. There is no greater rationality. Joyce struggles with what her own unconscious presents to her. Insomnia, paranoia, faith in Will's messages, an almost spiritual attachment to her children, an explosion of fury and grief. Your journey is twofold. She saves Will, but she also rebuilds relationships, reconciles with her own inner demons, learns to ask for help, and trusts unlikely allies. Being a mother is like crossing abysses, but does every sacrifice guarantee a return, or are there times when love needs to know when to let go? Jim Hopper, the wounded father, the authority in collapse. Hopper is a paradox, an exemplary police officer, a respected authority, but inside he is a cave of grief, guilt, and failure. The loss of his daughter Sarah transformed him. Every rough gesture is maladaptive protection. Every attempt to control signifies fear of reliving the pain. Their ID is both strength and fragility, a desire for redemption and escape, the constant effort to protect with power what they could not protect with love. In his interactions with Eleven, Hopper takes on the role of mentor. He tries to be a father figure, but he needs to learn that authority without tenderness becomes imprisonment. The relationship is vibrant. In moments of outburst, fighting, and punishment, Hopper repeats patterns that his trauma taught him. He's not the villain, but it's the adult who needs to learn from the child. Have you ever been too hard on yourself just because you couldn't bear to relive your own pain? Hopper shows strength without vulnerability can be just another portal to the upside-down world of the soul. Throughout the seasons, Hopper matures, allowing himself to make mistakes, apologize, cry, love Joyce, and fight without shutting down. What's harder, fighting the monster out there or facing the grief you pretended to forget? Even heroes have to save themselves. Dr. Brenner represents the cold shadow of authority. In the lab, he manipulates, lies, exploits, and sees children as weapons. 11 is the main victim, but everyone feels the echo of the violence. Their ID is the desire for absolute control, the illusion of being able to save the world by eliminating deviation, difference, and affection. Brenner pretends to be a father, calls 11 daughter, but never performs genuine acts of love. He is the authority that abandons, punishes, experiments, always in the name of the greater good. How many of us have been scarred by the adult who promised protection but brought only pain? Brenner is the lesson. Any authority that doesn't invest in truth feeds demogorgons in every basement. When confronting the group, Brenner is defeated by the strength of their bond, not by violence. He reappears, dies, returns in memories. It's institutional trauma that the entire city, and 11 more than anyone, needs to overcome. Can someone who has only learned to manipulate and hurt be forgiven? The greatest evil in Stranger Things is what hides behind promises of care without real commitment. The Power Pact. When adults and children unite or fail. In the best scenes, adults and children cross borders. Joyce learns from her children. Hopper trusts in collective intuition. And the circle of friends teaches parents about forgiveness, vulnerability, and unity. But not everyone always survives their own flaws. Adults make mistakes when they deny pain, fail when they don't listen, and become ill when they pretend everything is normal. When adults finally stop competing with their own children and listen, it becomes possible to close the portals opened by old traumas. Hawkins' great lesson. Heroes are made from the sum of their mistakes and the courage to transform the past into strength for the new generation. Perfection doesn't exist, but learning through pain can be the difference between survival and a fresh start. When the world seems on the verge of collapse, it is not power or authority that saves us. It is shared vulnerability. What have you learned from the adults in your life? And what do you choose to transform today? Memory, mourning, and the city as collective psyche. What happens in a city that prefers to forget its own horror? Stranger Things reveals that Hawkins isn't just a stage for monsters. It's a living laboratory of shared trauma, where every house holds a wound and every silence can open new portals. Behind the neatly trimmed suburbs, Hawkins is made of small deaths, suspended grief, and contested memories. Will's disappearance is not the only tragedy. Barb disappears, Billy dies, others vanish without the town processing the losses. The repression within the laboratory, the hushed-up scandals, the rumors surrounding 11 and the experiments are symptoms of a society that suppresses anything that challenges superficial comfort. Hawkins's collective psyche is an echo of the refusal to integrate horror. The lights flicker because there is pain demanding expression. Cracks appear where grief cannot be processed, where guilt has not found an answer. Have you noticed that every group tends to hide what hurts the most? Where Hawkins tries to cover up monsters, it only becomes more vulnerable. What wound has your town, family, or circle not yet been able to confront? The ritual of forgetting, celebrations, lies, and the social theater. After each disaster, the city performs flawed rites of passage. School celebrations attempt to reward the survivors, ignoring those who did not return. Parents use excuses, mental problems, accident, disappearance, to avoid facing the inexplicable. Official memory is always shorter than reality. Barb becomes a statistic, excluded from legitimate mourning. Billy is remembered in parts, never fully integrated into the cycle of forgiveness. The buyers themselves feel the loss of Will as an invisible trauma to those who have never crossed into the upside down. In Hawkins' social theater, every role has a limit. How long can we pretend that everything is all right? Parents, teachers, and authorities. the guardians of dis-repression. The role of adults in maintaining collective trauma is crucial. Teachers only teach about monsters in D&D circles. Police withhold details of cases. Laboratories suppress evidence. Neighbors create rumors and conspiracy theories. Hopper, Joyce, and even Dr. Owens oscillate between trying to heal and fearing to exhume the horrors of the past. The fear of public madness is greater than the fear of the monster. Nobody wants to be the first to name the unnameable. When the city doesn't listen to its prophets, it ends up placing the burden of trauma on the shoulders of the children. How many times have you felt the weight of a secret that was never told? Small deaths and great silences. The family abyss. The power of the upside down is also institutional. Hawkins loses children, parents, friends, but never truly grieves. Nancy and Jonathan lose Barb, each processing it as best they can, but the town moves on, as if it were just another strange day. Max carries the burden of losing his brother Billy. His pain is invisible, his cries silenced by the advance of normalcy. Will lives between here and there, traumatized. He feels that no one can understand what it's like to live with the monster inside. Far beyond the physical body, it's the emotional haunting, the depression, the chronic loneliness. What part of you got lost in the upside-down world of your own family? Hawkins shows that even the bravest must learn to grieve for what is gone. Conspiracies, rumors, and the risk of collective repression. Suppressing it doesn't end the trauma. It only increases the monster's sphere of influence. The longer Hawkins pretends to be normal, the stronger the upside down becomes, expanding its tentacles into every underground space, basement, and vulnerable mind. The mind flayer thrives in the cracks of denial. Billy, possessed, embodies everything that was left unsaid, every forbidden desire, all the accumulated rage. The collective outburst is vivid. Every adult, every teenager, every group is infected by the unprocessed fear. In the end, a city that doesn't mourn becomes a factory of monsters. In Hawkins, everyone is complicit, and only when someone dares to question the silence does the hope of healing begin. Memory, hope, and the role of the survivor. The fight against collective repression is constant. Nancy challenges figures of power, working as a journalist to revise narratives. Joyce physically detects the signs, covering the walls with light to rescue Will's voice. 11 learns that naming her pain is her greatest power, that integrating her own grief can save many more than just herself. The grieving process, by Will, Barb, Billy, Hopper, Bob, becomes a rite of passage, transitioning trauma into maturity, transforming threat into a chance for rebirth. What pain have you finally agreed to remember? Hawkins teaches that only those who touch their own abyss can truly live again, and never alone. Let's decipher how Hawkins attempts to grapple with magic, symbolism, and science. Is it possible to escape horror solely through the light of knowledge? Or does true healing depend on connection, courage, and reinventing one's own rituals? Symbol, magic, and science. Mystery, and the search for truth. Have you ever tried to explain the inexplicable? In Stranger Things, every flickering light and every die rolled in the RPG is more than just chance. They are symbols, signs, and desperate attempts to understand a world that refuses to fit solely into reason or fantasy. Lights that speak, magical realism, and the voice of symbols. The Christmas light scene is one of the most iconic moments of the series. Joyce, believing that Will is guiding her, from the other side, creates a communication system using symbols and codes, ignoring the laughter of her neighbors and the logic of the adults. These lights are much more than a desperate invention. They are the visual translation of the desire to listen to the invisible, to give language to what trauma has silenced. Each flickering light bulb is a miniature miracle, a bridge between science, madness, and hope. It's magical realism. Everyday life invaded by astonishment, by warnings from the other side of the mirror, as in Borges, Marquez, Murakami. What symbol guided you through the darkness? Stranger Things shows. Only those who have the courage to name their signs can invent new ways out of their own hell. Dungeons and Dragons, fantasy, as real emotional training. Role-playing games are more than just a game. They're how children train for the terrors of the real world. The game creates monsters, maps, challenges, an exercise in how to deal with moral dilemmas, losses, and collective decision-making. Each adventure is a rite of passage disguised as fun, a symbolic reconstruction of elementary philosophical principles: courage, ethics, sacrifice, otherness. The monsters in D&D anticipate Demogorgon and Mind Flayer. The intuitive mind of a child grasps dangers before the realistic adult admits any flaw in reality. When you were little, what fantasy helped you survive? Have you ever noticed that every game of make-believe prepares the soul to cross deserts that will come later? Science versus magic. Hawkins on the threshold of knowledge. The laboratory is Hawkins' attempt to master the mystery through brute science. It always fails when it tries to deny the symbolic element, the imponderable, that which can only be expressed in dreams, visions, non-linear connections. Dr. Owens, like Brenner, seeks to measure, control, and contain the accident, but is forced to realize in the end that he only opens deeper portals each time he ignores the boundaries of the symbolic. Science is essential, but insufficient. Hawkins only finds a way out when adults learn to listen to dreams, believe in children, and combine methodologies with poetic sensitivity. The search for truth is balanced between numbers, data, faith, rituals, and conversations with the unseen. What do you do when reason hits a wall? Stranger Things teaches us, truth is always the bridge between what I know and what I can't yet prove. Recurring symbols: bicycles, the path, the mirror. Bicycles, archetypal childhood, mobility between worlds, the journey without official authorization, echo of initiation cycles. Paths in the forest, getting lost to find your way back. Everyone has a moment crossing the woods, like the Greek myths of the rite of passage. Mirrors, reflections, doors, doubles of the soul, places where the self can be recovered or lost forever. The symbol, unlike the sign, holds mystery. It always points to something bigger, requiring active interpretation. Nancy in the Mirror, Season 1, 11 in the Void Booth. Billy and Max facing broken truths. Each confronts the symbol as one faces a sphinx. Only those who dare to ask will find answers. What symbol invades your dreams? And which one do you still ignore for fear of what you might find? Telepathy, codes, and the language that heals Eleven's powers, and the experiments reveal the basic premise of the series. The greatest traumas and hopes are always conveyed through codes. Music, light, data, letters, maps, psychic connections. All language is an attempt to bridge the abysses created by the solitude of fear. Will tries to draw his way back. Joyce reads maps of imaginary branches and tunnels. Friends rescue each other using passwords and alliances whose symbols can only be deciphered by those who know them. The secret to healing is not knowing everything, but trusting in signs, and in the communion between different people. In Hawkins, those who can decipher the mystery live. Those who ignore the symbols themselves sink into the upside down. What mysteries remain to be deciphered in its story? The philosophy of mystery, limit, desire, hope. No character solves everything at once. All knowledge is always provisional. Behind the next portal, a new enigma, a new monster, a new symbol will appear to be deciphered. In Stranger Things, ignorance is the fertile ground for disaster, but also the window to transcendence. Only those who recognize that they don't know everything can open themselves to wonder, reinvention, and legitimate hope. Max, Will, Dustin, Hopper, Joyce, Nancy. They all grow when they abandon certainties and embrace enigmas. Mystery is, after all, the language of the deepest reality. What do you pretend to understand just because you're afraid to question? In Hawkins, every truth begins with a doubt. Be ready for the next enigma or be devoured by it. Evil, the denouement, and the ethical choices that divide or save Hawkins. Are you prepared for the moment when the shadow emerges from the underground and demands an answer? Evil and its unraveling. Ethics, oppression, and radical choices. When the shadow finally invades the house, who will you be? The evil in Stranger Things isn't just monsters, but the dilemma of choosing between saving yourself or everyone else, between repeating traumas or facing the abyss. Evil has no face, but it has roots. Evil in Hawkins is always more complex than it seems. Sometimes the monster is supernatural, Demogorgon, Mind Flayer, Vecna. Other times the monster has a human face, possessed Billy, Dr. Brenner, complicit authorities, and almost always, evil is a shared shadow. Fear, exclusion, competition, repression, institutional or family violence. At the height of the threat, Hawkins must decide. The entire city is called upon to sacrifice. The circle of friends faces the choice of paying the price, and adults must fight internal and external battles. When everything is about to fall apart, are you able to face the beast itself? Or would you rather sacrifice someone than confront your monster? The fear of choice and the power to make mistakes. In the final seasons, each character is put to the test. Will, now torn between reality and the inverted, senses the presence of evil within himself, the ethics of the double, of including the stranger. 11 must choose between destroying the one who threatens her or saving the one who rejected her. Hopper and Joyce decide whether they will sacrifice themselves for the sake of their children, their love, and their town. Every solution requires someone to lose, someone to get hurt. It's the classic ethical dilemma. Save the group, the innocent, the family? The choice is never painless. In the philosophy of alterity, true evil is the refusal to see oneself in the other. Good requires that we be able to expand empathy to the limit of the impossible. What sacrifice have you made? And how did you decide between your own desires and the needs of the group? Oppression, violence, and the circle of the excluded evil thrives where there is repression. Authorities who refuse to listen. Families that punish those who are different. Schools, laboratories, and governments that treat people as numbers, weapons, problems. Billy is both victim and villain. His possession reveals tons of pain never processed by the group, the family, or the city. Hopper, Joyce, Max, and 11 confront the monster, but are also forced to decipher their inner selves. Trauma, grief, unspoken desire. As Simone de Beauvoir says, oppression is the seat of conflict. When evil erupts, everyone is forced to reconsider their own history. Do you think only monsters attack? Or have you ever felt that violence often stems from what has been ignored for too long? Radical choices. Who lives? Who dies? Who renews? The end demands unthinkable decisions. To give up one life in order to save others. Integrate the stranger. Ask the enemy for help. Rebuild alliances, forgive, or challenge those who have hurt you. Max pays the price. Will survives but is never the same. 11 sacrifices everything she has, including her powers. In contemporary ethics, Stranger Things reflects real dilemmas. Evil does not disappear with promises or blind hope. It can only be confronted through honest choices, by acknowledging limitations, and by the ability to transform losses into renewed strength. When the lights finally go out, who do you want to be? The next segment reveals whether Hawkins survives, and how the journey through the Upside Down transforms even those who never return the same. Fantasy, hope, and the final truth. After the confrontation, all that remains is the hangover. Open wounds, unresolved grief, cities rebuilt. Characters grow or become ill through the radical effort of traversing all the forbidden zones of their own inner world. Stranger Things concludes that fantasy is a language for pain. Hope, the only force capable of reinventing ritual, love, and community. When you return from your own battles, what changed? Share. Only those who face the monster truly discover who they can be. After the Upside Down, growing up, integrating the shadow, continuing to dream. Those who survive their own fear never return the same. After facing monsters and traumas, only one question remains. What to do with the shadow that was left behind? Or does it always walk beside us? When Hawkins breathes again after the storm, nothing there is purer. Not the adults, not the children, not the town. Surviving the Upside Down doesn't cleanse anyone. It adds layers, doubts, scars, power. The characters now experience what Jung called enantiodromia, when extremes become opposites and the hero integrates their own shadow, gaining in complexity and humanity. Integrating shadow. Will learns that fear never truly goes away. You just learn to live with it. He ceases to be merely a victim. He paints pictures, tells stories, teaches that even what doesn't return the same can continue creating, loving, resisting. 11 understands that power without connection only reinforces the trauma. To heal, she needs to lose, rest, and be embraced. From the weapon to the embrace, from the laboratory to the home, his journey is a living reminder that no one survives alone. Joyce and Hopper, now more mature, discover in each other the chance to rekindle their relationship. Not a perfect one, but a true one. They accept the pain. They engage in dialogue with loss. They celebrate imperfection. They understand that protecting is not about removing someone from danger, but about walking together towards the light on the other side. Who have you become after facing what you've avoided for so long? How does your shadow teach you to be more whole? Stranger Things as collective therapy. The series becomes a modern myth because it offers an audience refuge. Each character is a mirror of our own struggles. Trauma, exclusion, desire, fear, courage. Hawkins is a universal neighborhood, a portal between the known and the impossible, between real life and a dark fairy tale. The key is not to eradicate monsters, but to reinvent rituals. Christmas lights become a language to say, "I'm here." Bicycles and games are metaphors for journeys and pacts. Each season, pain transforms into a space for renewal. Have you ever told your story to someone who needed to listen? Stranger Things proves that when we are heard, even the upside down makes room for hope. The time has come for you to expand this universe. What was your Demogorgon? What symbol guided you in the dark? How did he find his way back? What else needs to be said, or cried, or dreamed, or played with friends to transform your own Hawkins? Comment here. Your story could be the code someone else needs to turn on the first light. Share this with anyone who has the courage to face real and imaginary monsters. Subscribe so you don't miss any analysis, because every season has a new portal waiting to be crossed. Remember, strangely enough, the greatest adventure is living with everything you were, desired, lost, and rebuilt. See you on the other side.